I used to tell myself that love was a stubborn river. If I just kept pouring my whole life into it, eventually it would carve a canyon through stone. I believed that about my son, the baby I carried on my hip through fever nights, the boy I cheered for from folding chairs, the man I kept rescuing from the small, mean fires he lit and couldn't control. I believed that if I loved him relentlessly enough, gratitude would come like rain after a drought. I believed that until the afternoon I wired him $330,000 and heard, through a sliver of carelessness, what he really thought of me. "Lucas Carino," I said, cradling the phone between shoulder and ear while I checked the bank app again. The adobe walls of my kitchen held the heat of the Santa Fe sun. Out in the courtyard, chimes murmured at a breeze I couldn't feel. "I just sent it. You should see it now." His laugh was bright and boyish, the one that used to melt me when he was 6 and missing his front teeth. "Ma, you're a lifesaver. You won't regret this, I swear. Tessa's craving oranges like crazy. I'll get the organic ones. When little Sol's here, he'll know his abuela is the reason he arrived in style." Sol. The name had been Tessa's idea, son in Spanish, painted on his voice like virtue. I swallowed the ache. "Make sure she has what she needs. Prenatal supplements, the good ones. And the clinic she likes. Don't delay your appointments to save a few dollars." He exhaled with performative relief. "We won't. We're on our way to—" "Hey, hold on." I heard a shuffle, a door closing, a hushed laugh that wasn't his. A second later, the line didn't fully mute, just softened. It was enough. "Finally, the old woman sent the money," Tessa's voice said. Light and sugar. Sweet, the way she spoke to waiters. Lucas replied in a tone I had never heard him use with me, an easy, contemptuous scoff. "She's too careful. We had to fake a pregnancy just to shake it loose." The bowl in my hands slid soundlessly back to the counter. For a heartbeat, I forgot how to breathe. The kitchen dimmed around the edges, as if a cloud had crossed the Sunday. They kept talking how much would be for the car, which credit card would benefit from the minimums, whether my inheritance could be accessed faster if I signed certain power of attorney forms. The words were coins dropping one by one into a pit. Lucas mentioned the next step, and Tessa giggled, a bright bell chiming for a murder of crows. I stayed there listening like a thief in my own life. My voice, when I found it, surprised me with its steadiness. "Lucas?" The scramble, the breathy. "Oh, we're still on." The re-entry into performance. "Ma." "Sorry," Tessa dropped her water. "You still there?" "I am," I said. I could hear my pulse in my teeth. "Tell her I'm praying for both of you. And, eat something salty if she's nauseated. I love you, Mijo." "Love you too," he said, quick as a tip tossed on a counter. "Gotta run. Big day." The line clicked. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a raven landed on the garden wall and blinked at me, glossy and old. There are moments when sound collapses and leaves you with light. I stood at the sink and watched a wasp drift through a beam of it, dust brightening the air like constellations. I thought of Lucas at 3, tracing his finger over the picture of a green dinosaur. At 9, clutching my hand as lightning stitched the horizon. At 17, promising, crying, promising again. I thought of how many times I had lied for him, tiny family lies, soft lies, the kind mothers are supposed to tell. He's trying. He's under pressure. He has a good heart. He just needs someone to believe in him. I had believed for both of us. On the shelf above the stove sat the cedar box Vivienne left me, the one that still carried the faintest scent of her perfume, iris, and paper. Vivienne Harrow, who hired me to manage her estate when I was 30 and my marriage was cracking under the strain of my husband's wandering hands. Vivienne, who taught me that a table well set was a script for kindness, who insisted on paying for my night classes when she saw me reading contracts with a frown. On the morning she died, She took my hand and told me the trust was mine. "Because you never took what wasn't offered," she said. "And because you're the only one who never made me feel alone while pretending I wasn't. People assume a fortune makes you loud. It made me quiet. Quiet enough to hear the truth when it came in a careless whisper." My phone began to vibrate with notifications as the wire cleared. The kitchen clock worked at the seconds. The little raven fluffed itself against the sundae. I picked up the receiver again, but not to call Lucas back. I dialed a number I kept hidden under a recipe card, written in Vivienne's fine hand, as if it too were a gift. Armand Duplessis, attorney at Harrow and Duplessis. He answered with his gentle New Orleans drawl, so polished it might have been taught. "Miss Morales, I'm honored to hear your voice." "Armand," I said, my voice low, "I have a favor to ask. I need to make some changes to the trust. Nothing massive, just protections." "Protecting your boundaries never requires explaining," he said. I could hear paper sliding across his desk. "I'll send a courier within the hour. And Elena, are you safe?" I looked around my kitchen at the kettle, at the woven rug, at the field of sunlit tiles, where I'd once taught Lucas to dance to old records. "I am," I lied. "For now." After I hung up, I set water to boil without meaning to. It was an old habit. Make tea, make sense. I opened the pantry and found the small jar of preserved lemons Vivienne had taught me to make, bright moons suspended in brine. I pressed my palm to the glass, as if I could press my grief into it, keep it cool, keep it from fermenting into rage. You do not know the shape of your own love until you see how easily someone else steps over it. That's what I learned, standing in that kitchen, while the kettle rumbled and the chimes trembled, and a woman I barely knew tugged my son's voice around like a marionette. I should have cried then. It would have been natural to slide to the floor and let the hurt pass through. But something else rose to meet it, a different tide, steady and saline. I thought of Chico, my old rescue mutt, asleep on his cushion by the back door, twitching from a dream, trusted and trusting. I thought of the cool tile against my bare feet when I carried Lucas to the doctor in the middle of the night. I thought of Vivienne's handwriting, all loops and certainties. And beneath all that, so quiet I almost missed it, I heard another voice, the one that came from my bones. Enough. The doorbell rang. I stiffened, then exhaled when I saw it was only a courier, thin, boyish, apologetic for the interruption. He handed over a leather folio with Armand's embossed initials. I signed and thanked him and listened to his footsteps retreat down the walk. The folio felt heavier than paper. It felt like a gate latch sliding into place. I poured the tea and added honey. The day brightened another fraction. In the courtyard, the prickly pear glittered with hair-thin spines. I brought my cup to the table and reached for my phone again, not to call Armand, not to call Lucas, not to pretend nothing had changed. I opened a blank note and wrote the first sentence I could think of. If you've ever been betrayed by your own blood, if you've ever been told that love means poverty and silence, then listen to me. I stared at it for a long time, steam curling against my cheek, and then I kept writing, the words tugging a hidden thread deeper and deeper through me. By the time the cup was empty, the note had become an opening. A way to speak my story without shame, to say the unsayable out loud. I would tell them how a mother's love doesn't mean what they think it does. I would tell them how to recognize the difference between generosity and surrender. And if my voice shook, it would shake on its own terms. If you've walked this road, I whispered to the empty kitchen, tasting salt at the back of my throat. Comment. Tell me what you did with your breaking point. Like this, if you need the reminder that you are not a wallet. Subscribe so I can tell you the whole of it, because this isn't over, not by a long stretch. The raven blinked, the chimes lifted like a breath, and somewhere across town my son laughed in a voice I didn't recognize. The morning after that call, I woke with a heaviness in my chest that no amount of tea or sunlight could dissolve. Santa Fe's high desert sky was wide and cloudless, the kind of blue that promised clarity, but inside I felt like the horizon had narrowed to a pinhole. I moved through my adobe house as though every room was a museum of sacrifices no one remembered but me. The breakfast nook still bore faint knife marks from when Lucas was 16 and had chopped cilantro badly for a school project, leaving more stems than leaves. The hallway wall carried the ghost of a dent from the time he slammed his door and cracked the plaster. Even the tiny cross above the bedroom door reminded me of nights I whispered prayers over him while he lay pale with fever, begging God to spare him. It all pressed down on me, heavy as the red clay soil after rain. I tried to swallow my disappointment like I always had. I told myself maybe I'd misheard, maybe the line crackled, maybe Tessa's tone was playful, not malicious. But I wasn't naive anymore, not after decades of being his crutch. Deep down, I knew I'd heard every syllable clearly, and I knew what it meant. Lucas hadn't changed. He'd only grown more skilled at wearing masks. My mind wandered backward, tracing the pattern that had always been there if only I'd admitted it sooner. At 21, Lucas lost his first job after just 3 months. He came home red-eyed, muttering about a boss who didn't get him. He demanded I cover his rent until he found something better. I emptied my savings account, convincing myself it was temporary. By 23, he was hooked on cards and dice, slipping out at night with promises of just a little fun. He returned with empty pockets and excuses sharp enough to cut. When collectors called, he came to me on his knees, swearing he'd change if I just paid this one last debt. I believed him. I sold my grandmother's turquoise necklace to cover the loan. By 28, he'd cycled through 3 girlfriends, each one leaving after the novelty of his charm wore off and the debts piled too high. He'd beg me for money, saying, "If you loved me, you'd help me." And I did every time. I see it now for what it was. Not love, but compulsion. Not gratitude, but entitlement. Vivienne once told me, "Some people think sacrifice is a gift, but if you give too much, you teach others you were born to be emptied." I didn't understand her then. I do now. It was Vivienne who changed my fate without me even realizing it. She hired me as an estate manager when I was 30 and raw from divorce. I tended her gardens, organized her library, paid her bills, made her tea. What began as employment blossomed into companionship. She introduced me to music, literature, wine. When I doubted myself, she placed legal contracts in my hand and said, "Read, Elena, learn. Power is written in ink." When she died 5 years ago, she left me a trust worth millions. "Because you treated me as a person, not a title," her letter said. "Because you deserve a life unchained." I never told Lucas the truth. I knew instinctively he'd see it not as a gift, but as a target. So I lived modestly, driving my old sedan, wearing my old sweaters, letting him think I had only what little I earned. Even then, he still came circling, sniffing for scraps. But last week, when Tessa claimed she was pregnant, I faltered. I told myself a baby might soften him, that if I gave generously now, perhaps I'd see the man I once dreamed he could become. Now I see how foolish that was. I spent that morning pacing the flagstone courtyard, Chico trailing me with anxious eyes. His tail wagged slow, uncertain, as if he could feel the storm brewing in my chest. I knelt, pressed my face into his scruffy fur, and whispered, "At least you never lied to me." He licked my cheek as if in answer. The phone buzzed again, a message from Lucas. "Thanks again, Ma. You don't know how much this means. We'll come visit soon." Visit. That was a word he hadn't used in years. I stared at the message until my hand shook. The thought of him and Tessa in my home, circling the rooms with their hungry eyes, made my stomach twist. They weren't coming to visit. They were coming to claim. I tightened my grip on Chico's collar and stood. For the first time, I stopped asking myself what more I could give. Instead, I asked, what am I willing to take back? 2 days later, the knock at my front door rattled the adobe frame. Chico barked once and then fell silent, slinking to his bed as if he already knew who stood outside. I smoothed my blouse, swallowed my dread, and opened the door. Lucas filled the entryway with his easy grin. One hand holding a bag of supplements he pushed into my arms. Tessa hovered just behind him, polished and glowing, her smile practiced enough to rival any actress. "Ma?" Lucas said, his voice light, almost boyish. "Had a free day. Thought we'd check on you." I glanced at the bag, expensive vitamins, imported teas. My lips lifted into a faint smile. "That's thoughtful, Maijo. Come in." Inside, the house seemed to shrink around their presence. Tessa's heels clicked across my tile floors, her eyes flicking to the antique chest, the hand-woven rugs, the little collection of turquoise bowls. Lucas flopped onto the sofa like he owned it, legs sprawled, hands laced behind his head. He gestured for me to sit. "Don't just stand there, Mom. Let's talk." I already knew what was coming. He cleared his throat, shot Tessa a quick glance, and launched into his pitch. "So, you know Tessa's pregnant." He paused just long enough for her to sigh softly, hand resting on her stomach like a stage cue. "The apartment's too cramped. Bad for her, bad for the baby. We were thinking maybe we could move in here, just for a while." I let my eyes soften, nodded as though considering. "Of course you can." Lucas's grin widened, but there was hesitation behind it, a restless gleam. He scratched his head, trying to sound casual. "And, I mean, since we'd be living here anyway, maybe it makes sense to put the house in my name. That way I can handle taxes, maintenance, take it off your plate. You don't need that stress at your age." My gaze slid to Tessa. She leaned forward, her smile syrupy. "Exactly, Elena. You've worked hard your whole life. You should relax now, not worry about bills. We'll take care of things for you. We're family." Family. The word soured in my ears. I looked at them both, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Sure." The silence that followed was almost comical. Lucas blinked, taken aback, as though he hadn't expected me to fold so quickly. Tessa's eyes flickered surprise, suspicion, but she recovered fast, her laugh lilting. "That's wonderful, Helen. Really, you won't regret this." But inside I laughed too. Because I wasn't handing them my house, I was handing them rope. And I was curious to see just how far they'd wrap it around their own necks. The atmosphere in the house shifted the very next morning. Tessa was in the kitchen early, frying eggs and humming like a perfect daughter-in-law. "Good morning, Helen. I made breakfast extra light, just for you." She set the plate down with a smile so wide it almost split her face. Lucas, who hadn't washed a dish in years, suddenly insisted on wiping down the counters. "Got to keep things nice for you, Ma. You deserve it." Their sweetness was thick enough to choke on. Every word, every gesture reeked of performance. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow shadows across the plaster. My chest ached with the memory of a younger Lucas, the one who used to run through these halls with grass-stained jeans, the boy I shielded when his father slammed the door for the last time. I wanted to believe there was still a trace of that child in him, but as I listened to their laughter drifting up the stairs, I knew better. And later, when the house had quieted, I heard them again, voices muffled but distinct enough to curdle my blood. "As soon as she signs it over," Lucas whispered, "we kick her out." Tessa giggled. "Exactly. By then, her inheritance will be ours anyway. Bye-bye, Mother." Lucas's laugh was low, cold. She doesn't mean a damn thing to me. She's just dead weight. I've got you now. What do I need her for? My hands trembled where they clutched the blanket. My son, my only son, was already planning my eviction like a business deal. That was the moment I stopped grieving him. The boy I'd raised was gone. All that remained was a predator wearing his face, and I resolved that the next move would be mine. Life in my own home became a theater I hadn't auditioned for. Every morning I woke to the smell of pancakes or omelets, Tessa bustling in the kitchen like she was auditioning for a homemaker's magazine. Lucas suddenly rediscovered the vacuum, humming off-key while pushing it across rugs he'd never noticed before. They wanted me lulled into comfort, softened into surrender. I played my role well, smiling faintly, offering thanks, nodding like a grandmother basking in her children's care. But inside, my heart had already calcified. I saw through every line, every gesture. It was Chico who noticed first. He avoided them, slinking to corners when they entered a room. Once, I caught him growling low at Lucas, teeth bared, before slinking under the table. "Get that mutt under control," Lucas snapped, voice sharp as a whip. "He's always in the way." I pressed my hand protectively over Chico's back, forcing my tone calm. "He's family too." Lucas rolled his eyes. "Family? He's a dog, Ma." But I knew better. Chico at least understood loyalty. The facade cracked sooner than I expected. One afternoon, I passed by the study and glimpsed Lucas's laptop glowing on the couch. I hadn't meant to pry, but the words frozen on the screen stopped me cold. How to take out a high-value life insurance policy for an elderly family member. Common ways for hikers to disappear without suspicion. Reassigning trust beneficiaries after death. My knees nearly buckled. I gripped the doorframe until my fingers ached. It wasn't enough to bleed me dry while alive. They wanted my death to pay out. That evening, I went to the insurance office under the guise of running errands. My voice trembled only once when I asked the clerk if anyone had filed a policy under my name. His nod was matter-of-fact, almost bored, but to me it was a gunshot. Premium tier. Expensive. Detailed. I left with a copy clutched so tightly my knuckles whitened. Outside, the winter wind bit my cheeks raw, but all I felt was the cold inside my chest. When I returned home, Lucas greeted me at the door with exaggerated warmth. "Ma, you must be exhausted from shopping. Let me carry that." His hand brushed mine as he took the bag, his smile practiced and hollow. Tessa appeared behind him, her voice syrupy. "Helen, I've been moody lately, snapping at you for no reason. I'm sorry. We thought maybe we could take you hiking tomorrow, get some fresh air, reset as a family." A hike. If I hadn't seen the searches, I might have believed them. I might have gone willingly, thinking a picnic would heal the cracks. But now I knew. The forest wasn't a retreat, it was a grave. I forced my face into gentle surprise, let my lips curl into a trusting smile. "That sounds wonderful. I'd love to go." For a moment, they faltered, exchanging a quick glance, almost as if they hadn't expected me to agree so easily. Then Tessa clapped her hands together, beaming. "Perfect, we'll leave early." I excused myself, went upstairs, and locked my door. The lamp on my nightstand threw soft shadows across the cedar box where Vivian's letter rested. I traced its edge with my fingertips, steadying my breath. They thought they had scripted my ending, but I had already begun rewriting it. The dawn of that hike came with a strange, eerie calm. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains loomed in the distance, violet ridges cut sharp against the blush of morning sky. Lucas's SUV idled in the driveway, exhaust curling into white plumes. Tessa leaned against the passenger door, dressed in sleek hiking gear that looked better suited for a fashion ad than a trail. "Ready, Ma?" Lucas called brightly, too brightly. He lifted my backpack into the trunk, as if he were a dutiful son, eager for family bonding. His eyes, however, slid past mine too quickly. "I'm ready," I said, slipping into the seat beside Tessa. I had already emptied their sedatives into 2 energy bars tucked in my pack. Their own medicine returned to them. The drive was long and winding, the desert slowly giving way to pine as the elevation rose. The air thinned, cool and sharp, filling my lungs with something that felt like both relief and omen. Lucas kept the radio on low, humming tunelessly, while Tessa offered rehearsed apologies for being snappy lately. I nodded graciously, as though I believed her contrition. Inside, I counted my heartbeats. We parked at Raven's Bluff, a trail notorious among locals for its vanishing markers and sudden drops. Every year, hikers disappeared here, their names etched into warning signs at the base. Lucas chose this spot deliberately. We hiked in silence at first, our footsteps crunching against gravel. Pines closed around us, whispering with wind. After 2 hours, we reached a rocky overlook where the valley sprawled beneath us like a painting. "Take a break, Ma," Lucas urged, gesturing toward a boulder. He pulled a chilled bottle from his bag and pressed it into my hand. "Electrolytes, good for energy." I lifted it to my lips, let the cool rim touch my mouth, and tilted my head just enough to mimic swallowing. When I lowered it, I caught their quick, smug glance, the almost imperceptible smirk they exchanged. "Perfect." From my pack, I drew out the energy bars, holding them like an offering. "You two should eat something too. It's a long climb." They tore into them eagerly, too distracted by hunger and anticipation to notice the faint seams I had resealed. I leaned back on the rock, closed my eyes, and let my body go slack. A practiced feint, convincing enough to make my chest rise shallow, my limbs limp. Finally, Tessa breathed, her voice dripping with glee. She actually drank it. Lucas's chuckle was colder than mountain air. "Sorry, Ma, but I need that insurance money." Their footsteps shifted beside me. Fingers dug under my arms, trying to drag me toward the cliff's edge. Their breaths were ragged with triumph, with greed. Then came the sound I'd been waiting for, a double thud, heavy and graceless, bodies hitting earth. I opened my eyes to see them collapsed, unconscious, sprawled in the dirt like marionettes with cut strings. I rose slowly, brushed the dust from my trousers, and adjusted the straps of my backpack. My pulse was steady. My hands did not shake. I gave them one last glance, cold and sharp. Then I turned and began my descent, the trail winding down into shadow. As the sun lowered and the temperature dropped, I hummed softly under my breath, a tune my grandmother once sang while grinding corn. The wilderness would teach Lucas and Tessa more about survival than I ever could. They thought they had chosen the battlefield, but the mountain belonged to me. The trail curved downward in long, jagged switchbacks. The air grew sharper, each breath cutting like glass in my lungs. My legs ached, but my spirit was light, lighter than it had been in years. Every step away from that overlook felt like shedding a weight I hadn't realized I carried. I expected silence to accompany me down, but then, faint and fractured, came a sound that snagged at my ears. A cry. Not Lucas, not Tessa. This voice was deeper, older, laced with pain. I paused, scanning the trees. The sound came again, weak and broken. "Help, please." I veered off the trail, pushing through brush until I stumbled upon him, a man crumpled against a fallen log, his right leg twisted at an unnatural angle. His face was pale beneath a scruff of salt and pepper beard, his hands trembling as he clutched his thigh. "Can you call someone?" His words rasped, each syllable strained. I didn't hesitate. I knelt beside him, pulled my phone from my pack, and dialed emergency services. My voice was steady as I gave the coordinates, though my heart hammered in my chest. "Stay with me," I said, pressing my jacket beneath his head. "Help is on the way." His eyes met mine, dazed but grateful. "Thank you. You saved my life." I brushed dirt from his sleeve, trying to soothe. "You're going to be fine. Just breathe." When the EMTs arrived, their red jackets vivid against the darkening trees, I stepped back, letting them take over. They loaded him carefully onto a stretcher, speaking in calm, clipped tones. One paused to ask, "Are you family?" "No," I said quietly. "Just someone who happened to be here." But before they wheeled him away, the man gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "Gabriel North," he whispered. "Executive Director of Northstone Capital. If you ever need anything at all, I owe you." I nodded, though I had no intention of cashing in such a promise. Just focus on healing. Still, his name clung to me as I walked the rest of the trail alone. Northstone Capital. The very firm Lucas had been desperately courting at his job, the one he boasted would finally make him indispensable. Fate has a way of turning corners sharper than any mountain path. That night, back in my adobe kitchen, I lit a single candle and poured myself chamomile tea. Chico curled at my feet, his breathing steady, anchoring me. I replayed the day over and over, the bottle, the bars, their smug faces as they dragged me toward the edge. And then the sight of them sprawled unconscious, the forest indifferent to their schemes. They had written my ending, but I had already begun my own chapter. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, had they made it down before dark? Or were they even now stumbling through the forest, chilled and afraid, meeting the wilderness they'd hoped would swallow me? I pressed my palm to the cedar box on the counter, felt its familiar weight, and whispered into the quiet, "Vivienne, you were right. Protecting yourself isn't cruelty, it's survival." By the time dawn spilled through my bedroom window, I half expected a call announcing their disappearance. Instead, my phone remained stubbornly silent, buzzing only with a message from Armand about revised trust documents. Then, hours later, the inevitable came. "Mrs. Morales?" a clipped voice said when I answered. "This is Officer Delgado with Santa Fe Search and Rescue. We located your son and his wife last night on Raven's Bluff. Both were unconscious but alive. Mild hypothermia, dehydration. They've been transported to Street Vincent's." I pressed a hand to my chest, forcing a tremor into my voice. "Oh my God. Thank you. I was so worried. I didn't know where they'd gone." The officer gave polite reassurances before hanging up. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at Chico's empty food bowl, my heart steady even as my face mimicked shock. They were alive. Good. That meant the charade could continue. When I walked into their hospital room later that afternoon, the scene was almost comical. Lucas lay pale against the pillows, tubes in his arm, his eyes flickering nervously toward me. Tessa perched at his side, her hair frizzy, her lips cracked, yet she managed a brittle smile. "Ma," Lucas croaked, "where did you go?" We passed out all of a sudden. It doesn't make sense." I let my brows knit together in confusion. "I don't remember. One moment I was hiking, then I woke in the hospital with a sprained ankle. I tugged my pant leg up to reveal the bandage the nurse had so helpfully wrapped earlier. The doctor said it was nothing serious." Tessa gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "So strange. We just collapsed. Could it have been altitude sickness?" I tilted my head sympathetically, my tone soft, maternal. "Maybe, but you're safe now. That's what matters." Lucas frowned, suspicion tugging at his features, but he was too weak to pursue it. They were discharged 3 days later, returned to my home as if nothing had happened. And soon enough, the old arrogance slipped back into place. "I'm craving lobster," Tessa declared one afternoon, lounging on the sofa. "And tomorrow, abalone soup. I need to nourish myself. Once, I might have chided her, gently reminding her to eat modestly. Now I only smiled. Of course, I'll make it just how you like. She smirked, satisfied. Lucas chimed in with a yawn. See, Ma? You're better off with us here. We'll take care of each other. I turned back to the kitchen, suppressing a laugh. Yes, I would take care of them. Every day, I prepared their meals, rich broths, buttery casseroles, decadent desserts. Tessa devoured them with relish. Lucas stuffed himself until his belt strained. They didn't notice how each dish carried just enough excess to slow them, fog them, weigh them down. They thought I was feeding them like a servant. In truth, I was seasoning their downfall one spoonful at a time. Yet fate wasn't content to leave it there. One morning, while tidying the living room, my gaze fell again on Lucas's laptop. This time, he had forgotten to close his inbox. I shouldn't have looked. I knew it. But my eyes caught on a subject line bold and damning. Insurance policy update. Elena Morales. A shiver crawled down my spine as I clicked. Pages of correspondence with an agent, clinical and precise, discussing payouts, beneficiaries, accidental death clauses. My own name reduced to numbers and signatures. In that moment, clarity struck like lightning. They weren't just parasites bleeding me dry. They were hunters circling a carcass, waiting for it to stop breathing. But I wasn't their prey. Not anymore. It didn't take long for the invitation to arrive. That evening, Lucas set his fork down with a clink and leaned forward, his voice bright but brittle. Ma, we've been thinking. Why don't we take you out this weekend? Fresh air, clear your head. Raven's Bluff was too much. Maybe somewhere gentler this time. We'll stick to the lower trails. Tessa placed a hand on my arm, her eyes wide with feigned remorse. I know I've been sharp with you. I thought maybe we could reset. Just a peaceful day, together. If I hadn't seen the insurance emails, if I hadn't read every line of their plotting, I might have believed her. But I knew. The hike wasn't an invitation. It was a death sentence wrapped in affection. So I smiled, nodding softly. That sounds wonderful. Count me in. For a second, their surprise slipped through the mask. Lucas recovered first, his grin stretching wide. Perfect. Early morning, then. Pack light. I excused myself soon after, retreated to my bedroom, and closed the door. The lamplight glowed soft across my cedar box. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face was calm, almost serene, but my eyes were steel. They thought they had set the stage. They didn't realize I'd already rewritten the script. We left at dawn, the SUV cutting through empty roads as the city faded into the horizon. Pines rose around us, shadows long and thin. Tessa chatted idly about baby names, her voice lilting, while Lucas hummed under his breath, tapping the steering wheel with restless energy. I sat in silence, hands folded, feeling the mountain air grow colder as we climbed. At the trailhead, Lucas pulled out the same brand of electrolyte drink as before. He pressed it into my hand with exaggerated care. Here, Ma, stay hydrated. I lifted it, let the rim touch my lips, tilted it just enough to mimic swallowing. My throat moved, my smile grateful. Thank you, Mijo. You're so thoughtful. Their eyes flickered to each other, smug, satisfied. Perfect. We hiked for hours, the trail winding upward until the forest thinned and the sky widened. At a scenic overlook, Lucas gestured toward a flat rock. Rest a bit, Ma. You've earned it. I sank onto the stone, watching them dig into the energy bars I had slipped into my pack that morning. They tore the wrappers with eager fingers, laughing, chatting between bites. And then, while they were still chewing, I let my body go limp. My head lolled, my shoulders sagged. I collapsed into the dirt with a convincing groan. She actually drank it. Tessa whispered, delight bubbling in her voice. Lucas crouched beside me, his whisper sharp and cold. Sorry, Ma, but this is how it has to be. I felt their hands grip under my arms, dragging me toward the cliff's edge. Their breaths quickened with triumph, with greed. Then came the sound I'd been waiting for. 2 dull crashes, bodies hitting dirt. I opened my eyes. They lay sprawled beside me, unconscious, their mouths slack, the wrappers of doctored bars scattered between their hands. I stood slowly, brushed the dust from my clothes, and adjusted my pack. My pulse was steady, my breath calm. I looked down at them one last time. You never understood, did you? My voice was low, steady. I've been preparing for survival my whole life. Then I turned and began the descent, leaving the mountain to teach them the lesson I never could. By the time I reached the trailhead, the sky had bruised into twilight. The last rays of the sun turned the mountains blood red before sinking behind them, leaving only the sharp bite of evening air. My body ached, but my mind was startlingly clear. I was alive because I had refused to play the victim in my own story. The ranger station was closed, so I walked the gravel shoulder toward the road. My breath plumed in white curls, and the silence pressed in around me. I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt freer with each step. And then again that faint, broken cry. Help, anyone! I froze. The sound came from a cluster of brush downhill from the trail. Heart pounding, I scrambled down, branches clawing at my arms until I found him. A man sprawled awkwardly against a boulder, his right leg grotesquely twisted, his face pale and slick with sweat. His lips cracked around the words, "Phone, please." I dropped to my knees without hesitation, dialing 911, my voice steady as I gave our location. He winced, closing his eyes as though clinging to consciousness. "You're going to be all right," I murmured, sliding my jacket beneath his head. "Just hold on. Help is coming." He opened his eyes long enough to look at me, pupils glassy but searching. "Why stop? People don't usually stop, because I know what it's like to be left behind," I whispered, stroking dirt from his sleeve. Minutes later, the red flash of EMT jackets appeared through the trees. They rushed to stabilize him, voices brisk and calm. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, his hand shot out, gripping mine with surprising strength. "My name, Gabriel North," he rasped. "Northstone Capital. You saved my life. If you ever need anything at all, I'll be there." I squeezed his hand once, gently. "Just focus on healing." But his name stayed with me like a flame tucked into my pocket. Northstone Capital, the very firm Lucas had been so desperate to impress. Fate had an odd sense of timing. At the hospital, I lingered in the waiting room after giving my statement. I didn't tell anyone about Lucas and Tessa. Let them stumble back down on their own, or not at all. I sipped burnt coffee, staring at the sterile white tiles until the doctor approached. "He's stable," the man said kindly. "You really saved him. Without you, he might not have made it." Relief loosened the knot in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt like my actions mattered for more than survival. When I slipped out into the night, Santa Fe's skyline twinkled beneath the mountains. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pinyon smoke from scattered chimneys. I breathed it deep, letting the city remind me I still belonged somewhere. At home, Chico padded to meet me, tail wagging slow and steady. I knelt to bury my face in his fur, whispering, "We're safe, boy, we're safe." But even as I said it, I knew the danger wasn't over. Lucas and Tessa would return, and when they did, the mask of sweetness would be back in place. I would let them wear it. For now, they came back thinner, paler, moving slower than before. By the time Lucas and Tessa shuffled through my front door, their eyes ringed with exhaustion. I had already set the table for them, roast chicken glistening, bread warm from the oven, soup fragrant with herbs. Lucas collapsed into a chair with a sigh. "Ma, you're a saint. After everything, you still cook for us." Tessa tried for a smile, though her lips trembled. We don't know what happened up there. We just blacked out. But thank God you're safe." I tilted my head, my face arranged in gentle bewilderment. "Yes, strange, isn't it? But we survived. That's what matters." They ate ravenously, never questioning the richness of the food I placed before them. Every bite was buttered, salted, heavy with comfort, the kind of meals that seduce the body into complacency. They thought I was nurturing them. In truth, I was softening the ground beneath their feet. For a week, the house became a parody of family life. Tessa lounged with pregnancy magazines, barking orders. "Helen, more water. Helen, the pillows." Lucas filled the evenings with idle chatter about work, about how close he was to sealing a huge deal. But one morning, his voice thundered through the walls, sharp with panic. I found him hunched over his phone, fists clenched. "What is it?" I asked, feigning concern. "They fired me," he spat, eyes wild. "Northstone pulled out of the deal, and the company blamed me. Security wouldn't even let me inside. They revoked my access." Northstone. Gabriel North's face flashed in my mind, his grateful grip on my wrist, his whispered promise. Fate had not only handed me survival, it had tilted the scales. I forced my tone soothing. "It's just a setback. Don't worry, I'll take care of you." He slumped into a chair, hollow-eyed, like a child denied a toy. That evening, I brought them soup and suggested gently, "Why don't you take a vacation, clear your heads, somewhere warm? Thailand, perhaps?" Tessa's eyes lit up instantly. "Thailand? Oh, that would be perfect. Beaches, resorts, shopping." Lucas hesitated, suspicion flickering. "We can't afford it." I smiled. "Don't worry, I'll book everything. Flights, hotels, even spending money. You deserve a break after everything." The hook gleamed too brightly for them to resist. "Are you sure?" Tessa pressed, already leaning forward with excitement. "Of course," I said sweetly. "Consider it my gift to you both." What I didn't say was that the bookings would be made on Lucas's own credit lines, already stretched thin. I would give them the illusion of generosity, the taste of luxury, the freedom to gorge themselves. And when they returned, the bill would come due not from me, but from his own name. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. Chico curled at my feet. The game was entering its final act. When the day of their departure came, Tessa floated around the living room like a queen, embarking on a royal tour. She wore a new silk scarf charged, no doubt, to Lucas's account, and rattled off plans for massages, shopping sprees, and photo shoots by the ocean. Lucas, though tense, still accepted the tickets and envelopes I handed him. "It's all prepaid," I said with a soft smile. "Flights, resort, even some cash for food. If it's not enough, just let me know." That last line made his eyes gleam with greed. He kissed my cheek stiffly before they left, a gesture rehearsed rather than real. As soon as the SUV disappeared down the street, I moved quickly. Boxes had been waiting in the garage for weeks. I called the movers men I trusted, discreet and efficient. By noon, every article of clothing, every shoe, every perfume bottle of Tessa's and every gadget Lucas thought he owned was packed. By evening, it was all donated to the community shelter or hauled away for auction. The house, once cluttered with their noise, breathed again. I walked barefoot across the tiles, hearing only the hush of my own steps and Chico's gentle panting. For the first time in years, the walls seemed to sigh with relief. I changed the locks before sunset. Their first message arrived before they'd even unpacked in Thailand. "Ma, can you send another $5,000? Just some extras we didn't expect." I transferred the money on Lucas's own credit line. I did it again the next day and the day after, each time sending a cheerful note. "Enjoy yourselves. If it's not enough, just ask." And they did. Tens of thousands poured into fine dining, boutiques, luxury tours. They gorged themselves on the fantasy I had laid out for them, never realizing it was built entirely on Lucas's debt. Meanwhile, I kept receipts, organized into a neat folder labeled Final Act. When their return flight landed, I was already waiting. Not at the airport, no. At home, where the locks no longer recognized their keys. The pounding on the door came within the hour. Lucas's voice thundered through the wood, raw with fury. "Ma, what the hell is this? Why won't the key work? Open up!" Tessa's shriek followed, sharp and brittle. "You can't do this to us. This is our house, you gave it to us." I opened the door just wide enough to stand in the frame, blocking their path. My smile was calm, unshaken. "No, I never did. What you signed was an intent form. Non-binding. Legally meaningless. This house has always been mine." Lucas's face drained of color. He snatched the folder I tossed at his chest and flipped through page after page of his own credit charges. Flights, hotels, jewelry, meals, all in his name. "This can't be real," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Oh, it's real," I said evenly. "You wanted to live off me forever. Now you get to live with the consequences of your own greed." Tessa's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Her voice broke into a screech. "You tricked us. You conned us with fake contracts and lies." I raised an eyebrow. "No. I simply gave you enough rope to show me who you really were." Lucas staggered back, pale as a ghost. For the first time, I saw fear, not anger, in his eyes, and I knew my reckoning had only just begun. Lucas's fury cracked wide open. He shoved at the door, voice breaking with rage. "I'm your son. How could you do this to me?" I didn't flinch. I reached into the side table drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. "You're not my son, Lucas. Not by blood." His breath caught, his body stiffening as though I'd struck him. "This," I said, pressing the envelope into his hands, "is a paternity report. Your real mother was the woman who tore my marriage apart. She abandoned you, and your father vanished soon after. I could have left you too. But I didn't. I raised you. I gave you a name, a home, an education. I paid your debts, bought you a house, forgave every betrayal. I gave you everything I had. And what did you give me back? Lies. Cruelty. A plan to bury me on a mountain for money." His lips moved, but no sound came. Tessa snatched the papers, scanning them with shaking fingers. "This can't be true. It can't." "It is," I said calmly. "And now, whatever fantasy you spun about inheritance, about this house, about me, you can bury it along with your schemes. Because it's over." Tessa's face twisted, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You'll regret this, Helen. You can't just cut us off." I let out a cold laugh. "Regret? No. My only regret is that it took me 61 years to finally put myself first." I turned, opened the door wider, not to let them in, but to usher them out. "Get off my porch, and don't come back." Lucas's shoulders slumped. His eyes, once blazing with entitlement, were hollow now, desperate. He whispered one word, broken and small. "Mom." For a moment, something inside me wavered. Then I remembered Chico's empty bed, the insurance papers with my name reduced to a payout, the sound of them dragging me toward the cliff's edge. I steadied my breath. "No, Lucas. You lost the right to call me that." I closed the door. Behind it, their voices rose into chaos, pounding fists, shrill insults, sobs muffled by the thick adobe walls. I leaned against the wood, listening to their storm crash and fade, until silence finally fell. Later that night, I stood at the window, Chico curled at my feet. The city lights shimmered below, steady and unbothered, like stars that had found a way to root themselves in earth. I poured a glass of wine, raised it to the empty room and whispered, "To endings and to beginnings." My phone buzzed. A message lit the screen. "Where are you? I'm coming to pick you up. Leonard." When I stepped outside, his sedan idled at the curb, headlights glowing soft. He rolled down the window, his smile warm and steady. "It's been too long, Elena. Don't you think it's time we take each other seriously?" For once, I didn't hesitate. I opened the door, slid into the seat, and let the comfort of his presence wrap around me like a quilt. I had spent my life being emptied. Now, at last, I was ready to be filled by peace, by choice, by love I didn't have to beg for. And as we drove into the night, I knew my story wasn't ending here. It was finally beginning.